Soeren, have you joined the call here? Are you in this room with me? You have. There we go. I can see you. How are you, Soeren?
I'm good. Rainy over here in Seattle. How's the
Uh,
weather in the Netherlands?
it's also wet here in the Netherlands. But I mean, the stereotype for Seattle is that it's supposed to be raining, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we had such a
Okay.
dry summer. It was getting dangerous for our reputation.
It almost looked nice. Seattle's beautiful, and it's beautiful because of the rain, like Ireland, where I'm from. Just before I hand over to Soeren, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A part of the chat. If you see a question in there that you really like and you think that's one that I should have asked, please upvote it, and then we'll focus on those questions when it comes to the Q&A section at the end. Okay, Soeren, best of luck, and I'll talk to you in a while.
Thanks a lot for the intro, Andrew. Thanks everybody for being here. And as I could just see, like at the craziest times, so I won't even say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because there's some good early mornings in there. Let me share my screen and bring up a little presentation. And I don't know whether I'll also will keep an eye on the chat in parallel. So the title of my presentation is what everyone should know about good marketing localization. Of course, it would be interesting to see how many people of you are in marketing. I want to take Andrew. Andrew is, so I might not telling him a whole lot of new things. But for some of you, marketing localization might be a new beast. For those of you who are in marketing, the localization part might be new. So I hope there's something in there for everybody. Well, Andrew already introduced me. I've been in the industry for 25 years. And as you mentioned, I'm also teaching localization. I've also taught at a few other colleges. And I've been working at Microsoft for nearly 20 years now. And actually, my last big software project, I just saw that there's somebody from Slack speaking. So when we brought out our competitor, not only of Slack, but also of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, I was the one responsible for the first release in 18 languages. So shortly after that, I moved to marketing localization. Yeah, I'm still working on Teams, but on Microsoft Teams pages, advertising, marketing teams, and then also on those pages aimed at small and medium businesses, in case you're wondering what that SMB is for. There's lots of different abbreviations in different languages for that, small and medium businesses. So basically every company, any company that's probably below like 300 employees, something in that area. So what I will cover is basically well, the whole range of things that you need to think about when you are in marketing, especially when you're in marketing localization. So the question of how do you bring traffic to pages? What actually is the purpose of those individual pages? And then I will be talking about something called the funnel. I wonder how many of you have heard of the funnel. Should have brought one to demonstrate, but I will have an image of it. I will be covering metrics, data, and insights. And to drive insights, there are some tools among them, as Andrew already mentioned, A/B tests. Some of the specific page elements that we need to pay a special attention to in localization, although as somebody who works in marketing, even for any small market, you might want to take some of those lessons with you, and then some of the marketization opportunities. So that's quite a bit. So I just have a marketing page for you here, Microsoft Teams page. And it might have actually already changed since this screenshot was taken. Yeah, I see that somebody's already asking what the funnel is. I will cover that. So the this page does not just exist by itself, right? And it is one of by now billions of web pages out there. So things don't start with that page, although that was the homepage for Teams, not one of the pages further down in a regular customer's journey. So the very first thing that people in marketing need to think about is bringing traffic to pages. And so there's a whole art of search engine optimization. And I'm not a specialist. There are people who are really have deep expertise in that. And I know that there's some people who have deep expertise in international SEO, which is the abbreviation, work. Maybe what I should mention is that there's good tactics and there's kind of the evil tactics, the black hat ways of trying to get yourself up in the rankings. That's what it's all about, right? You want to be found. Your page should be found when a user looks for a page. So this is Microsoft Teams on Google. So we want to make sure that when somebody looks for Microsoft Teams, they actually find Microsoft Teams and not, Slack as the first one. And so there's a few things that need to be done. So there's a lot of meta information in each HTML page. There's title tag, meta description, and so on. So those things need to be done correctly. But it's also about keywords on the page, and so you want to have certain keywords that people are looking for actually in the actual page text. And I don't know how many of you have ever stumbled over these weird pages that just try to draw traffic, that would just repeat certain keywords over and over and basically have a list of keywords. That is black hat tactics. They just try to lure you in. So it also obviously needs to make sense for the user. But that is a high art, really thinking about what keywords to use. There's also algorithms that just, the algorithm basically checks for how well linked a page is. So, and those links also need to be reputable, so they cannot come from pages that themselves rank really low. The higher they rank, the better for the backlinks. Increasingly, the Google algorithm has focused on some of the fundamentals like page load time, also responsive design for mobile, and so on. So there's quite a few things. As I said, I cannot really go into too much detail there. What I would like to point out is that people in the US and probably in many other markets think about Google first and foremost when they think about SEO. So you might be talking with website development teams that are merely focused on Google, but we know that China, for example, they have Baidu, they have different algorithms you might need to optimize for them differently. Yandex in Russia. And then there's also the question of if you have videos on YouTube, so there might be different media that you might want to think about as well. So that is the first step, bringing that traffic to your page. One thing that I would like to point out in terms of keywords, you do have, so in many companies, you would have some sort of standardized terminology, especially around your product, like especially around software and support content, because you want to make it easy for people to understand what you're talking about. But the keywords that people look for on the web might not reflect that terminology. So that is definitely something that you need to balance. What is it that the market really uses when talking about a product like yours, and what is it that you are using internally? So you definitely need to think a lot more about sort of standardizing terminology for SEO. You basically need to think about variation and synonyms there. And that's something where I feel like we don't really have that many great approaches in terms of terminology management yet. And then there's obviously the differences between language variants that might, in many cases, not that important. But for SEO, those might impact search behavior by market. So if you have English, US versus UK, or the different versions of Spanish as shown here, like Spanish Spain or Mexico. So definitely something to keep in mind. So the next question is, what is that marketing page for actually? What are you trying to achieve on that particular page? So, and this is where the funnel comes in. So Mario, now I'm hoping to answer your question. So basically, we know it's not the funnel to the left, it's the funnel to the right that I will be talking about. But it's kind of that shape. You try to bring in a lot of visitors first to just create that awareness of your product, your service, whatever you're marketing on your page. So that is the very first step. They might not be searching. I showed that search for Microsoft Teams. They already know, right? Probably they would be searching for video conferencing, something like that. So first, creating that awareness that you are actually covering that with your product or service, and then generating interest. So you will already have people drop off in that step, and then people will consider your product for, well, they might consider it for signing up if you have a freemium product, or if you have a free product, they might consider it for a purchase. So that really depends on how you offer something. And from that consideration stage, you want to get them to really convert, meaning that they will become a buyer or consumer of your product. So that is the funnel, because you always lose people in those different steps. And when you look at explanations of the funnel, you will see the different stages. You will see lots of different ways that funnel is, that the different steps in the funnel are being described. They should reflect this overall one, but you will see different variants of this, of the words, of the different stages. It will really depend on also what is that conversion in the end. Where do you want to get people to? So basically, on your page, you need to know what is it that you want your visitors to do at the very end. So there's one, the one that I'm showing below is maybe they just need to learn more, so that they become more qualified visitors. So you basically take them from awareness to interest to consideration. That might be one thing. Or you have so-called calls to action, CTAs. And that could be, you have a button from which you can immediately buy the product, or you have a link to a form where you can contact the sales team, or you want people to download your app. So that CTA can look very, very differently, but you should have that call to action somewhere towards the end of your customer journey. And that could be not the very first page that somebody lands on. You might send them to another page. Maybe they need get some more information. But eventually, you will have some sort of action that should happen. So you see an example. So when you looked at that page in the very beginning, you probably did not necessarily notice the CTAs unless you're a marketer yourself. So we have different things here. We actually have sign in into Teams. We have the sign up for free, and then see plans and pricing is actually getting people to more information. So that would be more on the information side. But you basically have these different actions that you want people to take. And in most cases, you see, well, normally you would see these CTAs pretty high on the page, because there's something called the fold, which is above the fold is basically what people can see when they open a page, and when they don't have to scroll down. So everything below the fold definitely gets a lot less attention. But of course, a lot of pages have that. So this is just an example for the information where you make people more qualified. So this is from that same page. Much further down, we have an FAQ, and people would learn more about the product. They have specific questions. So I was already talking about the customer journey. So you might have different sets of pages. You might have those pages that are mostly for getting traffic to your site, I should probably say. So those pages where you can describe exactly what people are looking for, and then you might send them to another page from there. You have those conversion pages where it's very clear that you want people to take the action at the bottom of the funnel, that conversion step, and then you have info pages where it's more about getting more information before they get qualified. And you might also see a mix of these components on each page, as I already showed. But you would have, if you have pages that are more dedicated to one aspect or another, you need to see how do these pages fit into an overall flow. So as I said, you start with trying to get traffic to your page. Where does that traffic land? And then somehow you want to get them to the conversion. So that funnel might be happening through different pages, and you should know where each page fits into this overall flow. So for all these things, you obviously want to know how successful you are. So you want to measure what your visitors are actually doing. The nice thing is that web metrics have been around since basically the web exists, and there's some very established ones. It's pretty easy to slice them also by markets, if you have different locales for your different markets pages and so on. What you want to look at is a few key metrics. So first of all, visits, how many people are really visiting, and normally you would want to look at unique visitors. You have bounces, which is the opposite of engaged visitors. So bounce is when somebody comes to your page and doesn't do anything. The problem is that not doing anything could also mean they stay on your page and read everything. So normally there's also a time threshold for how fast they leave the page to define what makes a bounce. And just not clicking anything is not sufficient to define a bounce. And then you have engagement, how many people are clicking different elements on the page. Obviously, if you have several pages that are lined up for a flow, you want to know how many people are clicking those individual links. And then eventually you want to check for how many people are actually purchasing or trying your product, how many are signing in if you have a service, how many people are signing up new, downloads, and so on. And when you're looking at rates between these different steps, you, of course, want to know the absolute numbers, but you also want to know the relative data, right? How many people that visit your page are actually buying? So that would be a purchase rate. So you have these relative data as well coming along with the metrics. So we're looking at the funnel again. So let's say you have a page where people just sign in on, let's say, your Google Mail. So you want to make sure that people are actually signing in into your mail service. So this is basically how the funnel would look like, right? You have visits, you have people that are actually really engaging on that page. The sign in intent, well, in most cases, sign in intent and sign in should be the same, unless there's something broken between that step where somebody clicks the link and then really signs in. You can also have like visits that eventually should be converted to purchases, where the purchase flow itself might be a little longer because people might need to give you their address. They might need to give you, well, they will probably need to give you some way of paying. So maybe they need to enter a credit card number. So between buy intent and purchase, you might see drop-offs. So you want to have all these individual steps shown and then see the relative numbers for that. So tons of data, and I just have a few examples here. To the right, you see a heat map, not very granular. You can make that a lot more granular, where you basically look at how many people are seeing elements on a page, how many people are clicking on the elements of a page. And there's quite a few of these tools around. And then here I have something that is actually showing the visits to Teams pages, and I took that last year when we saw obviously a big spike. I think the May data are not even complete, but But we also saw more engagement and, as I said, engagement and rate, basically engagement rate and bounce rates together 100% of the visits. So all these things you can use to analyze what is going on. In this case, it's interesting that despite the fact that there were more visitors, the bounce rate did not go up, which is very often the case because you might have a lot more visitors that are just vaguely looking, they might not really engage with the page. So all these qualitative data are great, and they can show you anomalies, they can show you where you might want to improve, but they don't really explain why people are behaving that way, right? Why are people not engaging on your page? Like, you have this beautiful page and people take a quick look at it and are leaving it again. What's going wrong there? So you need customer insights, and you can do that lots of different ways. So you can have usability studies in depth, so you can actually bring people in, or you can do it remotely. Have somebody just sitting in front of your page, and you just tell them, talk me through what you're seeing and other things that you don't understand, and you just let them play around with it. So, I mean, there are usability people who can give you all that guidance. Obviously, because you need to bring people into a place where they can screen share, where you can observe them well, that might require quite a bit of budget. You can have user interviews that are a little looser. There's also companies that provide pools of people that you can interview. You can have crowdsourced usability studies where you basically just have people do things at home and they talk you through what they are seeing. So that whole screen sharing, all that, it's not done in a lab, for example, but there's software that is doing that. And then you can also do user surveys on your site, right? You can always ask people, but we all know, we've probably all seen so many surveys already that people get tired of that. So this is something that you need to be really careful about and not overuse. And you should also know that people often respond to these surveys not necessarily the way that you would expect them to. So people who are happy might not respond, but the people who are mad, and they might not complain about the layout of the page, although you ask them about it, but about your product. So even if you do it really targeted, we've seen that these user surveys are always to be read with a grain of salt. So then one of the greatest tools that you can use is A/B tests. So I don't know how many of you have heard of that. It's being used. It has been used widely for web pages. People are using it in the software world as well. When you make one change, you should make one distinct change, because if you're making lots of changes, you won't really know what is impacting your user behavior. So you start with a hypothesis. If you make this change, this specific change, the metric X, let's say the purchase rate will be changed. And of course, you want to change it favorably, right? You can also guess by how many percent or how many percentage points that might be impacted. And so you basically just give a certain percentage of your users this variant, and you keep another percentage of users on that control. So basically the version that people have seen before. And then you see how do things change. And you can do A/B tests, you can do ABC tests, you can test more than one variant. But if you test too many variants, you might never reach statistical significance for those metrics that you're measuring. And you can actually measure more than one metric. In many cases, you might see a cascading effect, like the buy intent. So people wanting to buy, and then people who really get through the whole purchase process. If it's a little more complicated, those would be two metrics that could go along. But they might not change exactly in proportional fashion. So that's what A/B testing is about. And that the more you can do of that, the more you will learn about your customers. Just need to quickly check on time. I think we still have a few more minutes. I want to leave some time for questions, obviously. So just looking at a marketing page, there's a few components that you might want to test and that you might want to change. You also might want to marketize, so you change it by individual market. So there's a few things that are especially interesting for localization. So you have all the text elements, and you might want to think about transcreation versus translation. And I won't go into that at all, but still, people are very reluctant to use machine translation for marketing content, right? It's more creative. So the translation quality should be definitely high and higher than in several other areas. Talked about SEO considerations, and then what are your quality assurance mechanisms? As always, when it comes to translation quality, right? You want to have something built into your processes. Do you have reviews? If you have subsidiaries, can they give you feedback? Do you have at least native speakers in market, and so on? Then visual assets are really important in marketing content. Are the visual assets that a core marketing team is picking, are those suitable across the world? I just picked this example. You see that the gentleman here has on the lower highlighted in red, he had a tattoo. That is something that for Japan is not well suited. For Japan, normally the market is really reluctant to see people with tattoos. So we removed that tattoo, and you see the new version up there on top. Just a small thing, but yeah, it's a whole separate topic talking about the suitability of visual assets. You want to avoid religious symbols. You want to avoid too much skin, especially for Middle Eastern markets. Offensive hand gestures, and offensive can differ so much across markets, right? So a lot of those things play a big role, and the people who are selecting visual assets in a central marketing team that are not involved in localization, they might just not be aware of the fact that something might not be suitable. And for a big market like the US, they might be a little more careful because they already have a diverse population, but especially starting in a small market, they might just make assumptions that images could be suitable worldwide, and they're not. And then videos are important element increasingly. So you need to think about subtitling versus dubbing marketing videos, or translating, having a translated voice over, dubbing, obviously the most expensive one. So that also is a whole different conversation, talking about that. But those conversations should happen early on between marketing localization teams and their marketing teams. So for the marketization itself, obviously text can offer a big area of possible marketization. You can just change the messaging. So instead of just going with a translation, and you might want to advertise elements of your product differently across markets, right? You might highlight certain features in one market and not in others, and so on. So there's a lot of things that you could do there. The overall terminology, the wording, lots of opportunities where it's beyond just transcreation, translation, that text could be modified. For images, you could use market-specific images. I have an example here in my slide deck that I won't talk about, but this is an old version of the Teams page. We had videos there early on about different organizations using Teams. That was in the early phases of COVID, and we would obviously, since there were different videos available, we would also show the different images from these videos per market. And we've seen in several A/B tests that actually more market-specific images can really make a difference. And then you can have always additional modules. You can have things that are not shown on one page in one market that could be shown in another market. You will not be able to see that, and it's really small, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. But we have payment instruments on our. We have a choosing module where you have different products in comparison that you see here in the upper image. And we show payment instruments for a few markets. In a market like the United States, people just assume that they can pay with credit card, which is also true. But there are other markets where there might be payment instruments beyond that people want to use. And so we advertise those payment instruments.
Soeren,
Yes.
Sorry, Soeren, just want to interrupt for 1 second. We're getting close to the end of the time for your presentation. There are a few questions which have come in, and just with the detail on the slide, we can share your slides if it's okay with you. We can share your slides so all attendees can actually get them and see the detail in these parts of the presentation. But if you want to take another minute just to round out,
I will wrap things up. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit behind. So
no
always measure the metrics after the implementation, just like an A/B test, so that you see that it's successful. And then I have this list of questions for marketers. I will skip those so that we can get to the questions, because it's basically marketers should really think about what impact does their work have on localization, what are their kind of the international dimensions, what are their key markets, and so on. LSPs should really think about, should put on more of a marketing hat, and for marketing localization specialists, basically all those things that are highlighted, they can think about. So here is the summary. I think I'll just leave this slide up instead of the questions slide, so that you see the overview and we can get to the questions. Yeah, sorry for rushing to the very very end.
No problem, Soeren. That was fantastic. There was a huge amount of information in there, and I know you're covering a massive part of the industry in such a short space of time, so you did a great job to get as far as you did with it. Okay, so we have a number of questions that have come in. Just for those of you who are following this presentation, there is going to be a book awarded for the best prize, and Soeren has nominated the book. He'll also get to decide which is the best question, and the book for this Q&A session is Nicholas Ostler's Empires of the Word, A Language History of the World. So the first question that came in, the one which has reached the top of our list, is from Anna Peacher. I hope I haven't butchered your name entirely, Anna. She says, "Hi Soeren, any book recommendation or general tips for an LPM new to the marketing localization world, working in the client side in technology?"
Oh, I'm blanking on that one, I have to say. And since I moved to...
I was just going to say, we can come back to that if you want to think about specific answers for book recommendations on the marketing localization. Also, if any of the questions here haven't been addressed fully, they will be addressed. We'll give a chance to get them addressed, and they'll be posted via Smartcat's social media over the next week or two. So anything Soeren doesn't get to right now, because I'm waffling, we will cover. Okay, the next question, the first one came in from Mario Chavez in the USA. Soeren, how do I convince management that we need visibility into user engagement, perform user studies, etc., when there is no habit of giving that info company-wide?
I'm not sure I understand that. If there's no, what was the last part? If there's
the last part, shared. Yeah, when there's no habit of giving that info company-wide.
Also, it's not regularly shared. Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the question here. I think it's actually one of the it would be one of the important assets of doing this kind of research, to share it company-wide, because it's so important. I would say that it's always the question how important the international markets are for the strategy. The best starting point is always looking at the numbers. How many of your users are outside of your source market, right? If you're in the US, how many people are not in the US, and then go from there and try to um, just prove with your numbers how important it is to get more insights in that area.
Yeah. I think that's fair. There is another question there from Mari, which is quite related. So I'm going to jump to that one just very quickly. Sorry, what is the resource cost of implementing? Oh, it's just jumped on me. What is the resource cost of implementing user studies and A/B tests? And again, tied into his first question, how do you justify to management the need for greater visibility into users of localized versions of the websites?
I would say so. It's really hard to give you an estimate for those studies, because you can have so many different levels of how much work you put in there. I mean, you can hire third-party vendors that charge quite a bit, and but give you all the analysis and everything, or you can even have like phone interviews with people in those markets, and do that basically all by yourself. Set up a Zoom call with people, right, and talk to a few stakeholders. Obviously the challenge there would be the recruiting, but there's really such different levels that it's really hard to put a price tag on there. But
Yeah.
that might actually help with how you convince management, because you can start small and then you can get bigger. And as I said, really important is that you prove that it's important for the company, and you would best pick some of the bigger markets, start with those, get the insights there, and then prove that you're making changes
Exactly.
that actually benefit.
So I think the most important thing is to start. I have a question here from Luis Herrera. Considering the nature of evergreen content and top of the funnel content, is translating, not transcreating or localizing, the best way to go? And then he says, according to his experience, both original and translated pieces had the exact same SERP result.
So that sounds like people were looking for content in English, but I would really need to understand that concrete scenario.
Yeah.
Because there should be a different behavior. I mean, you can prove by numbers that if you do SEO work for English to Spanish, yeah, I would be surprised if non-translated content would give you the same. Probably really depends on the search behavior of people. I mean, Microsoft Teams, the term is, that's not translated either, right? And people are obviously looking for it. But as soon as you want people to also be able to find your pages when you have video conferencing in there, you should better translate it and have it translated on the pages. So that sounds like an interesting case that would like to understand better.
Yeah, it would be good to know a bit more about that. If you could send us on a bit more information, Luis, we'll get it to Soeren and we'll put you guys in contact. The next question next on the list is from Yosevi A. How do you measure impact of localization in conversion rates? Now that's a big question.
that is a big question. Yes. I mean, technically you can do an A/B test for that as well, right? You can have part of the market go to an English page and part go to a localized page, and you would, I would guess that you would definitely see an impact there. If you mean that question more granular, kind of the localization quality, we've done A/B tests where we just really modified a little bit of the wording. So conversion might be impacted by what you put on a button, what that CTA says. Whether you say buy or buy now in your translation, might make a big difference. And actually, all that fine tuning of words, if you do that in the source language, and people are doing that as well, right? It's not that our US marketing teams would not experiment the whole time either. So that actually shows for me the importance of localization quality. That kind of all that wordsmithing that's going on in English, we need to have that equivalent.
Yeah.
And yes, you can prove it in tests.
Cool, very much so. I have a question here from Catherine Busman. Beyond marketing translation, are there certain kinds of international marketing services, for example, ISEO, multilingual A/B testing, non-English focus groups, cultural QA, etc., that LSPs could be offering or perhaps should be offering?
That's a really great question. I think that LSPs could offer a lot in that area, a lot of that expertise, and there is quite a bit of cultural expertise. When I was showing like that example with a tattoo, right? Mm-hmm. That is something that even a good localization PM, if you cannot know everything about all the markets and companies who are just going international, who might not have a whole lot of international presence. In Microsoft, we are lucky enough, we have subsidiaries, so many markets. I work with people in those subsidiaries very closely, but companies who don't have that, they need the expertise, especially if you're running expensive campaigns, you want to get those right. And I feel that LSPs could definitely get, offer services in all these areas that you mentioned.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Ileana has asked, should marketing copies be localized by copywriters, or are translators with great creativity enough? Should they suffice?
I think it can be either. So it really depends on how creative you want to have the content. That really so much depends on the content, how much creativity, right? How broad is that spectrum? And that's why I put transcreation / translation in there. You can have those really creative translators that are nearly like copywriters, or you go with copywriters from the bat.
Perfect. There's two more questions. One of them here is from Andrea asking if she could see the marketer's slide again. All of these slides will be made available after the presentation, Andrea, so we will get that to you. And then the final question, because we're running out of time, is from Alex H. Leclerc. How do you conciliate keywords users are using? How do you conciliate keywords that keywords? I'm trying to make sense of this question. I'm sorry, Alex. How do you conciliate the keywords users are using and correct terminology? How can we make usage of normative language work together? So I'm guessing it's like you'd mentioned the difference between the terminology and how words are actually used in day-to-day. What is somebody going to actually search for?
Yeah, and that is a dilemma that some companies are just facing. Translators might just not be aware of the fact that they need to be more going for SEO. So you really need to make sure that people understand what context something is being translated in. And as I said, I haven't really seen a great solution for getting that together, kind of the normative terminology that you want to use, for example, in software. And then when you have a web page for that software, that you then go more for the SEO and use the keywords that users are using.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that is it in the questions that have come in. Soeren, would you like
Andrea,
to...
I'm sorry, can you please share one more time this slide which Andrea is asking? Because she just want to make a print screen. It's a slide for questions for marketers.
Soeren,
yes.
Yeah,
just for 1 sec. So yes, so she can make a print screen and then we can wrap up. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Okay, Soeren, would you like to nominate or announce the winner of the best question?
Oh dear. Can I see that? The Q&A? Can I actually see that? Oh yeah, I should be able to. I
believe. And then if you click on it, there's also the questions which have been answered. So there's a number of the questions in there. The first few from Mario, Anna, Lewis, and Catherine are in there. And then there's 4 still in the open, which have all been asked as well. If you'd like, I can read back the questions to you very quickly.
No, I just need to quickly take a look here. They were all really good questions. So in this case, I will actually give, I would like to give a shout out to Mario because he asked 2 questions. And I hope that we answered them well. And this is not a marketing book. It is, but it's fascinating because it's talking about language and of how languages gain an importance in history.
In the world, yeah, it's a fascinating book. I've read it before. It's a great book. Mario Chavez, congratulations. Soeren, thank you very much for your time and for the presentation. It was fantastic to get a bit more on that side, on the marketing side within our industry, because I think there's a huge overlap. But yes, thank you for your time, and we hope to hear from you again at some stage.